Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. Julian here for a very exciting episode. This one about my top 50 fantasy defensemen. Before I jump into my list, guys, drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, and consider hitting that join button down below on YouTube or joining my Patreon. Either way, you get access to my Patreon exclusive league and my draft rankings, as well as being able to DM me one-on-one if you do join my Patreon. So definitely do that. If you do decide to join on YouTube, though, be sure to hit me up on my email address. It's linked in my channel. And just let me know what your email is so I could give you access to early access videos, which is another perk. Let's not waste any more time here, and let's jump right into my list of top 50 fantasy defensemen. And first on the list, shouldn't be any surprise, it's Cale Makar with an ADP of 10. Had 90 points last year in 77 games. Makar is an absolute stud and should not be underestimated at all. Definitely someone who has a very, very high ceiling and a very safe floor. I personally have him ranked at 15th best fantasy player, but drafting him earlier is never a bad idea if you want to get your hands on the best defenseman in fantasy. At number 2, I have Roman Josi with an ADP of 27.5, had 85 points last year, has been rocking and rolling in fantasy every single year, and he's always the second best fantasy defenseman, but for some reason he's never ranked as such. I currently have him ranked 25th overall in terms of fantasy players. At number 3, I have Rasmus Dahlin, who actually had a bit of a down season last year with 59 points. And if that's a down season, I want me a piece of that because peripherals are great. He's probably going to put up close to like 70 points this year. I personally have him ranked at 38, but that may be actually quite low. His ADP is 34 right now. Evan Bouchard is my 4th ranked defenseman. He's actually number 2 defenseman off draft boards right now, going at 20.8, which I think is a little bit high. That being said, he did score 82 points and is going to be playing on the top power play in Edmonton. So if defensemen are going really early, Evan Bouchard is a really good one to be grabbing in your draft. At number 5, I had Adam Fox, who scored 73 points last year on a very potent top New York Rangers power play. He's going to be keeping that spot. He's going at AP of 40.2, and I have him ranked at 51. At number 6, I have Noah Dobson, who plays on the top power play for the New York Islanders, managed to score 70 points. He is arguably their best fantasy player other than maybe Matt Barzal. His ADP is currently 69.5. I have him ranked at 52, so that's definitely good value. Mackenzie Weegar is my number 7 best defenseman, and his ADP is all the way down at 89. I have him ranked at 54, so if you can get this guy anywhere near the 89 to 100 range, that is going to be an absolute steal. Why is Weegar so good? Because not only did he put up over 52 points last year, he puts up some great peripherals, like a really safe floor every single night. He shoots, he hits, he blocks, and those points keep coming. And towards the end of last year, he was actually put on Calgary's top power play, so those points are going to keep coming. He's probably not going to score 20 goals again this year, but the points should be similar or even higher than last year. Victor Hedman is my number 8 defenseman on the board, had 76 points last year, and I currently have him ranked 66th overall, going at ADP of 40.6. Honestly, I don't absolutely hate that, even though it's a little bit earlier than I have him ranked. Going for defenseman early is not that bad of a strategy. Plus, Hedman could end up finishing a lot higher than I have him ranked. He really is that guy in Tampa Bay now. He doesn't have Sergachev to compete with anymore. He's going to be getting that top power play time. So that is really, really good for Hedman, and definitely could have himself a monster season this year on a top power play featuring the likes of Kucherov, Jake Gensel. That's going to be really, really deadly. At number 9, I have Josh Morrissey, who put together another great season, scoring 69 points in 81 games. I currently have him ranked at 82, going at 54, so it's a bit early. But again, if defensemen are going early in your draft, you may not have a choice but to reach a little bit forward defenseman because you don't want to have terrible defense on your team. It really does depend how your draft goes. But like I said, I illustrated a couple guys who are going later than where I have them ranked. So you might want to go for those guys instead of Morrissey, even though I do think Morrissey's going to have himself another really great season. Quinn Hughes is another guy who is being overdrafted in my opinion. I don't care if you guys hate on me for this. This is what's going to happen. He's going to score himself a whole lot of points. Last year he scored 92 points, but he's not going to put up that many peripherals. That's what really hurts him in fantasy. Now, if you're in a pure points league, yeah, draft him as the number 2 or 3 best defenseman off the board easily. But most people don't play in pure points leagues. You count shots, you count hits, you count blocks. Quinn Hughes shoots, but doesn't hit or block a whole lot, so his overall value is brought down by that. Plus, the Canucks as a whole last year had a really, really high on-ice shooting percentage, so that's going to go down a little bit. Quinn Hughes is probably not going to score 92 points once again, so that's why I have him ranked at 10. I still think he's going to have himself an amazing season, but for fantasy purposes, he's my 10th best defenseman. At number 11, I have Morgan Rielly, 58 points in 72 games last year, and is going at an ADP of 85.5. I currently have him ranked at 89th overall, so this ADP is actually pretty reasonable for his actual return value, and I think that you can't go wrong drafting Morgan Rielly here. He's going to be manning that top power play with the likes of Austin Matthews, Nylander, Marner. It's going to be a pretty good power play once again in Toronto, and Rielly is going to benefit from it. Number 12, Moritz Seider of the Detroit Red Wings had 42 points in 82 games, and this is what he's kind of shown the last couple of years. A point every 2 games or so, but very solid peripherals, particularly in the blocks category. I currently have him ranked at 91. He's going at 85, so that's definitely the right range to be drafting him in. And honestly, if things go really well for Detroit this year, he could exceed that, so I definitely don't mind drafting him here. At number 13, I have John Carlson, who had 52 points last year in 82 games. A little bit of a down year for him, but I still do believe that he is one of the best power play quarterbacks in the league. And this year, I do expect Washington to be a little bit better offensively. They were terrible last year, so there's no way they're going to be as bad. They did add a little bit of firepower to their team. Guys like Andrew Mangiapane or Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think, are actually going to do well in Washington, and I think their scoring overall is going to go up. It's pretty hard for it to go down from a very, very down season. So overall, a lot of their players are going to improve, and John Carlson is going to show why he's being drafted way too late currently at an ADP of 118.6. That's absolutely crazy. I have him at 96. Obviously, it's not that much higher than I have him ranked, but still could be an absolute steal if he plays to his max. Mikhail Sergachev is my number 14 ranked defenseman. I have him currently ranked at 103, but this is honestly a very conservative ranking. He could end up being way higher by the end of the year. He's finally getting power play 1 duties all to himself on Utah, a new team for him. And honestly, Utah's power play shouldn't be too bad with the likes of Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, and Logan Cooley. At number 15, I got Dougie Hamilton. His ADP is 63.6, which I think is way too high. And even though I do have him ranked as my number 15 defenseman, I will personally be staying away from Dougie Hamilton. I'll let somebody else deal with the headache that is Dougie Hamilton, because he could go and be the 4th best defenseman in the league one year, and then he'll go and either get injured for the whole year or just be an absolute shell of himself for a whole season and be barely fantasy rosterable. He's the kind of guy who just does that, and he's not someone I'm very comfortable with drafting this year. So I do have him ranked as my 104th best player, but I would not draft him in this range, and I'm going to be staying away from him in all of my leagues, especially with Luke Hughes being there in New Jersey now. Who knows if they're going to give Hamilton that number 1 power play spot back. I think they might want to keep giving that to Luke Hughes, so Hamilton is not someone I'm overly high on drafting this year. At number 16, Charlie McAvoy is going at an ADP of 76.2. I have him at 105, but obviously, guys, if defensemen are going early in your draft, taking a guy like Charlie McAvoy is not a bad idea. He's definitely a very, very safe pick. He's pretty much guaranteed to be in that Bruins top power play. Had 47 points last year and should hover around the same range with decent peripherals. At number 17, Zach Werenski, someone who's so underrated every single year. I have him ranked as my 114th best player, so his ADP makes a lot of sense to me and honestly could exceed that ranking. Columbus may be a little bit better this year, so the offense might be even more there. And if he can stay healthy, he's definitely going to be a good value there at this ADP. At number 18, I have Mike Matheson. And honestly, if he gets top power play time all season like he did last year, he's going to well exceed this ranking. I have him ranked at 122. He's going at an ADP of 127, so that makes a lot of sense to me. The only reason I think he may not get that top power play time the whole season is because Lane Hutson is a very intriguing prospect for Montreal and is very, very dynamic offensively, and they may start giving him some top power play time. It may not happen right away at the beginning of the season, but at some point, Lane Hutson may take that top power play time away from Matheson. And Matheson last year scored about half his points on the power play, so that is really significant. It's a little bit worrisome drafting Matheson this year, but the upside is definitely there. Got him at number 18. At number 19, I have Vince Dunn. His ADP is at 113.6, and I currently have him ranked at 123. So we're in the same range here. Now, you guys might think that Brandon Montour coming to Seattle might affect Vince Dunn's value a little bit, and it might a little bit, but Seattle does like to run 2 power plays, and they play them pretty evenly. So Vince Dunn is still going to be quarterbacking the top power play, and Brandon Montour is probably going to be quarterbacking the second power play. Both will get plenty of power play times, and they shouldn't eat into each other's values too much. At number 20, I have Jacob Trouba, whose ADP is 152.0, which is very, very late in drafts. And despite his point totals going down to 22 points only last year, I have him ranked as the 127th best fantasy defenseman. No, he's not a great defenseman in real life, but for fantasy purposes, he does hit and block and shoot quite a bit. So the peripherals are there, the safe floor is there, and I think he's going to put up a little bit more than 22 points this year. Even if he doesn't, the floor is pretty good, and he's not an exciting choice at all. Doesn't have a very high ceiling, but has a very good floor. I have him at number 20. At number 21, I have Chris Letang, who's going at an ADP of 138.5. I currently have him ranked at an ADP of 131, along with Erik Karlsson, who's a couple spots down on this list. They make up one of the 2 guys who's going to be on Pittsburgh's top power play. Karlsson was there last year, wasn't particularly amazing last year on that power play unit. Pittsburgh power play was really, really bad last year. And if I'm not mistaken, they went back to Letang towards the end of the year, and it was better on that top unit. Either way, these guys rank 21 and 24 respectively for me. They put up some decent peripherals, and they'll put up a decent amount of points. They'll probably go over 50 points a piece. They're not the most exciting draft picks in the world, but Letang is going late enough that he's probably worth picking. Erik Karlsson is going on ADP a little bit too early for my liking. At number 22, Darnell Nurse, I have him ranked at 132. He's going at an ADP of 159, so by that logic, he's pretty good value, and he only scored 32 points last year, which is nothing too exciting, but like Trouba, his peripherals are really good. He puts up a decent amount of blocks, hits, and shots, and even though those numbers have been going down a little bit each year, the floor is still pretty safe with these guys. And again, he's not a great real-life defenseman, but for fantasy purposes, he's pretty serviceable. He's not exciting at all, but definitely someone who can give you a very safe floor night in and out. And if you do make a lot of risks in your draft, drafting Darnell Nurse this late in the draft is a good idea to make sure that you have at least a couple of safe players to make sure you're hitting a floor every single night. At number 23 is where I have Miro Heiskanen, and I know a lot of you guys might think that's really late. I had him ranked way too high last year, and the reason he is ranked so low is those peripherals. He doesn't put up a lot of peripherals at all. Shots, blocks, hits, doesn't do that much. So the floor is not that safe any given night. You really need him to score points for you, and 54 points is great, but when you don't pair that up with some solid peripherals, he shouldn't be ranked too much higher than I have him on this list. At number 24, I already discussed Erik Karlsson when talking about Letang. And at number 25, I have Brandon Montour, who I discussed a little bit when talking about Dunn. I do believe they'll play on separate power play units, and Seattle has enough decent talent to put on both units that both should get deployed pretty decently. And I think Montour should have himself a half-decent season. I have him ranked at 146, so if he is actually going at ADP of 85.5, I would ignore him. But if he does end up falling a little bit later in drafts, then I wouldn't hate drafting him around that 150 range. As my number 26 fantasy defenseman, I have Drew Doughty, going at an ADP of 108.5, which is okay. I have him ranked closer to 150, so I don't absolutely love that ADP. 50 points last year is pretty good. But what I am worried about this year is if Brandt Clarke looks really good, they may opt to give those power play 1 duties to Brandt Clarke. If they do, Drew Doughty loses a lot of value and suddenly is a gigantic bust at this ADP. At number 27, Shea Theodore is a pretty good fantasy defenseman every single year. The problem is he can't stay healthy. His ADP is 126 and definitely deserves to go at that range if he does stay healthy. But I docked him some spots because he never seems to be able to stay healthy. I have him ranked at 151. At number 28, I think Jakob Chychrun does pretty well in Washington, at least better than he was in Ottawa. That plus-minus last year was horrendous. I think he'll do a little bit better. I have him ranked as my 160th best fantasy defenseman, and he's going in that range ADP-wise, so I don't absolutely hate it. He's not going to get top power play time in Washington since they do have John Carlson, but he still probably does get at least 45 points this year. At number 29, Alex Pietrangelo is someone who's usually a very safe floor night in and out. He blocks a lot of shots and overall has pretty solid peripherals. So I have him as my 161st best fantasy player. And at an ADP of 150, that's not too bad. At number 30, Mattias Ekholm is currently going on ADP of 116.5, which may be a little bit high because he's not going to really get any top power play time in Edmonton. I have him ranked as my 164th best fantasy player, so if he does drop a little bit after this, I don't mind him. He's a pretty safe floor guy and should put up at least 40 points once again. At 31, I have Justin Falk going an ADP of 177, which is actually pretty solid for actually where his value is. I have him ranked at 168, so this is good value for him. He puts up some really solid peripherals, and with Krug maybe missing the whole season, will they put Justin Falk on that power play one? It's possible. It may be Perunovic, but if it's not, Falk could gain some value there. At number 32, I have Radko Gudas. Obviously, if you don't play in the league with hits, don't draft him this high. That would be really stupid. But if you do play in the league with hits, this is pretty solid value for him. I have him ranked just around the same ADP as he's currently going at 169.5. At number 33, I have Gustav Forsling, who I have ranked at 180 best fantasy player. He's going at an ADP of 93.5. Do not draft him in that ADP. Even though he's pretty solid with that floor every single night, his ceiling is not really that amazingly high. Drafting him at 93 doesn't make any sense. At number 34, I have Seth Jones ranked as my 181st best fantasy player. He's currently going at an ADP of 140, but if Chicago's power play does improve this year and he keeps getting that top power play time, he may have himself a little bit of a better season. I don't absolutely hate him here. At 35, I have Aaron Ekblad, who should get top power play duties in Florida this year with Brandon Montour gone. I have him ranked at 184. 109 seems a little bit early for me, especially with his injury history, so I'd probably avoid Ekblad unless he does fall quite a bit later. At number 36, I have Brock Faber going at ADP of 115, which is a little bit early, but definitely should have himself a solid sophomore season after going 47 points in 82 games in his rookie season. He's definitely got a promising future and probably mans that top power play once again in Minnesota. Thomas Harley is the next guy I got on this list. 47 points in 79 games last year. Pretty solid. I'm expecting him to build upon that a little bit this year and have another good season. At number 38, Noah Hannafin, 47 points in 80 games. Should do a little bit better than that this year, possibly getting top power play time in Vegas. I have him ranked at 192, but honestly could end up finishing a lot higher than that, just depending how much power play time he does get in Vegas. 115 seems a little bit early, but if defensemen are going really early, you may have no choice but to draft him a little bit early. At 39, Devon Taves is a pretty solid player. He puts up some decent peripherals usually. They've been going down though over the last few years, not as good as they were a couple years ago, but still pretty decent, and 50 points is not out of the question for him every single year. At 40, Neil Pionk is always a decent fantasy defenseman. I have him as a top 200 defenseman. And if defensemen are going early, which a lot of times they do, you may have to draft them around 155. It's not the end of the world. 35-ish points every year with a pretty solid floor for hits is pretty much what you're going to get with Neil Pionk. At number 41, I have Jake Sanderson, who's a young stud for Ottawa who could have a major breakout year this year. If he does, he could finish well ahead of where I currently have him ranked. But he's definitely got not the highest of floors either, so this is a pretty solid ranking for him. He had 38 points last year. Look for him to build upon that this year. If you want to reach for him at 131, you can go for it. It is a bit risky though. Then we got Brady Shea on the Nashville Predators, and Brady Shea never really needed power play time to succeed in fantasy. His peripherals are decent, and he puts a lot of points in the back of the net, so I'm imagining he probably does the same thing in Nashville, though it'll be interesting to see how they utilize him. Brent Clark is an interesting case because I think he's going to have himself a decent season no matter what, but if he really proves himself, he may be able to eclipse Doughty on that top power play and really start having himself a fantasy viable season. He's definitely a huge risk, but definitely has some upside. Number 44, I have Travis Sanheim. I don't know if he's going to get top power play duties in Philly. They like to really switch up a lot of guys there, whether it be York or Zamula or whoever they decide to put there. Travis Sanheim should have a decent season regardless, about a point every 2 games or so. He's not the most exciting pick, but definitely a pretty safe one. Then Shane Gostisbehere, the Carolina Hurricanes, should be their power play 1 quarterback this year. There's no other reason they would have got this guy. He's someone who really needs the points, though, to have fantasy value. He doesn't put up a whole lot of peripherals, so you got to hope that he does well on Carolina's power play, which I think he should. He sure can go cold quickly, though, if a power play dries up. At number 46, I have Ryan Pulock of the Islanders, and he's not an exciting pick either. His ADP is currently not applicable. It's really, really low, so he's not being drafted in a lot of leagues. He's someone who gives you a pretty safe floor with blocks and other peripherals. Is not expected to put up a lot of points. I wouldn't expect much more than 25, maybe 30 points in a season if he has a really, really good year. Nothing too crazy, but it has a safe floor. Jake McCabe's a similar thing. I wouldn't expect much more than 30-ish points with some decent peripherals to give you a safe floor night in and night out. Not a high ceiling, though. Same with Colton Parayko. Good peripherals, a peak of maybe 30 points. And again, not a super exciting ceiling. Thomas Chabot has a bit more of a ceiling, but he's someone that I think sees Sanderson eclipse him for that top power play spot, which really hurts his value. Also, he can never seem to stay healthy a whole season, so I kind of dropped him quite a bit of spots this year, but I still think he will have a little bit of fantasy value. And finally, Lane Hutson, who's a very intriguing rookie this year for the Montreal Canadiens, could potentially steal that top power play spot and run with it. He's definitely kind of a low risk, high reward kind of pick because he's not really being drafted in fantasy. So if you're in your last round of the draft and you want to take a shot at a defenseman that could really end up panning out, Lane Hutson might be the way to go. And if you're curious who I had at number 51, it's Rasmus Anderson of the Calgary Flames. Now, I think Weegar might be that power play 1 guy since they were giving him that time at the end of the year. But it's possible they end up going to Rasmus Anderson at some point in the season, and that's where he may have some value. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed my video, please drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Consider hitting that join button if you want to take your support to the next level and see my draft rankings. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.